We all know jam sessions are at the heart of jazz, gypsy jazz, and most forms of music really, and are a vital part of shaping everyone's musical journey one way or the other. But jam sessions can go either way. You can be in one and just cannot wait for it to be over, which can be really painful, or you can watch your clock at some point and realize it's like 7 in the morning and the sun's coming up, because it's that good. I've been around jam sessions more or less since my teens, jammed anywhere from New Orleans to Paris to Brazil, have been blessed to be able to jam with some absolute legends like Didier Lockwood, Stockel Rosenberg, and many more, but also just to really anyone on the streets while busking or jamming at festivals. So I wanted to distill from all these experiences like a summary guide, the 10 principal things to think about and to remember that you want to keep in mind for jam sessions to be the best possible experience ever. Make sure to watch all 10, stick around till the very end. You don't want to be that guy that when people see you arrive, they freeze and turn away. You want to be that guy that when people see and know that they're going to get into a jam session with, they're excited and they're happy and they know it's going to be a great time. It's absolutely painful to see when there's that one guy who doesn't realize that what he's doing or his behavior is getting on people's nerves and is affecting the joy of the experience of everyone. My wish is that by the end of this video, you'll be sure to not be that guy. You'll know what to do, you'll recognize all the signs, and you'll always be the guy that brings value to a jam session rather than suck the energy out of it. If you don't know me, I'm Dario Napoli. I've been a professional musician now for over 20 years, touring and recording, founder of the Under the Tuscan Sun Gypsy Jazz and Jazz Camp, author of Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, leader of the trio in my name. No, just kidding. But anyway, all that good stuff. You can look it up if you want. So let's dive right in. The 10 things you want to keep in mind and make sure of to have the best possible jam session. So, point number 1. Make sure you know the main tunes of your repertoire. Whether it's a blues jam, a jazz jam, a bebop jam, or a gypsy jazz jam, try to make sure over the years that you learn and master and keep learning and getting better at the main tunes of that repertoire. In gypsy jazz, for example, although there's hundreds of tunes that could come out, realistically, there's maybe those 20, 30 tunes that invariably will come out because they're just over time become the most recognized tunes and the most played tunes for whatever reason. So it's good to be in tune with that. And some part of your practice should go towards always getting better at those main tunes anyway. Yes, I'm thinking of minor swing. I'm thinking of dinette. I'm thinking of nuage. I'm thinking of minor blues. I'm thinking of I'll See You in My Dreams. All of me. And the list kind of goes on, although it's not a humongous list. And of course it may vary, so over time you will keep adding tunes to your repertoire. But essentially, when it comes down to it, and you play with people that you don't know, especially for the first time, more than likely those are the tunes that are going to come out. So it's a good habit to make sure you keep getting better at those tunes and you keep studying them and going more into depth into them, so that when you find yourself in jam sessions, for the most part, you'll always be more comfortable than not. Now, of course, occasionally you'll be in a jam session and a tune will come up that you don't really know that well and you still want to play it because the hang is nice, you like the other players, and you play the tune. So I want you to reference this video right here to make sure you start getting better at learning tunes faster. It's not a complicated thing to do, but it requires a bit of a mindset shift and a habit pattern shift. So make sure you watch this video again right here, and it's always a good habit to get better at learning tunes faster. And by the way, it'll improve your musicianship overall anyway. It'll come in very handy for your improvisation and your overall playing. Number 2, see this little thing right here? Yeah, it's called a tuner. Now, if you've played music long enough, I know you can probably tune up your instrument well enough. But you don't want to be outdoors or indoors where there's a lot of people and noise and having a hard time tuning up your guitar. But one little thing of these always around can really help you always just be at peace and know that you can just tune quickly. It's really painful to know that your instrument is not in tune, but not really hear it well enough to tune it, and then it just affects you and everyone else around you. Just a little tuner, and in a few seconds, you know you're in tune, whether there's no light or whether you can't hear yourself or whatever the circumstances are, keep your instrument in tune. It helps you, it helps everyone around you. Number 3, unless there are clear roles that are verbalized or assumed, your rhythm should always be tight, consistent, and supportive. Keep the embellishments to a minimum. Listen always and avoid overcrowding the groove. Now, there are situations, again, where it's clear and obvious who is going to be holding the rhythm section at its most core level and being very, very steady, and who might have the freedom to embellish and be more creative in their rhythm. Sometimes that's just assumed. When I play, for example, with Benji Winterstein in jam sessions, I don't even have to ask him. I know he's going to take that role because he wants to take that role. And everyone knows that. It's fine for everyone. And so everyone has a steady ground to then play around with, which is a beautiful thing to have. And it's a role that you do want to get to a point where you can sustain and handle. But unless that's clear and that's stated or assumed obviously, you want to start by being that guy. You want to be the guy who keeps the rhythm as steady as possible, as even as possible, as supportive as possible for everyone around them, at least to begin with. Always pay close attention to the others. How are they playing rhythm? Sometimes it's an unspoken thing. If you hear somebody hold the rhythm very consistently and you play around a bit, you see the reaction. If it's well received, you can take some liberty. But make sure you also offer that in return and are capable of doing that. There's nothing worse when more than one guitar player is playing rhythm like this. Keep those accents to a minimum. There's no need. Keep steady. Keep steady. Time you want to break that rule a little bit is on turnarounds or at the end of sections, but otherwise keep steady, keep solid, and once again get a feel for the situation. And if you feel like there's enough players that are happy and are willing and able to keep the rhythm solid, then you can take your liberties and comp and be creative, but always be mindful of what everyone else is doing in this sense. Number 4, rule of thumb: if there's 3, 4 or more guitars, keep your choruses to at most 2. When you start getting into large jam sessions, the last thing you want is people to necessarily be soloing 4, 5, 6, 7 choruses. Tunes this way last forever, and it's just unreasonable from a musical point of view. Now, that doesn't mean that that cannot ever happen. There's situations that are so energized and so positive that that'll be gladly tolerated. But in general, when there's 3, 4 guitarists or more, say what you have to say in a couple of choruses and pass the ball over. And again, you'll get a sense of what kind of jam it is. There's jam sessions where people are trying to feel each other out, and so it's more about being the collaborative ones at first. So then that's when you want to keep your choruses to 1, 2, maybe 3 most, and then pass the ball over. Then, of course, there's situations where the mood is so positive, everybody's so enthusiastic and so collaborative that, yes, you can take your freedom and take more than 3, 4 choruses, however many you want. And usually that happens when you know the other people very well, very comfortable with them, and they are comfortable with you, and you can just let loose. But in general, if you're in a jam session, you're not sure, and you don't know everyone else so well, you're more than 3, 4 guitarists, 2 choruses is good enough. And of course, on ballads, that's reduced to even 1 chorus. The last thing you want to be doing is on ballads have people play 3, 4 choruses on a ballad, and then you have tunes that start lasting 15, 20 minutes. That really becomes like a drag and not fun, and it will suck all the energy out of a jam session. Ballads can be a great break in jam sessions and beautiful moments. But when you have 3 or 4 guitarists and maybe 2, 3, 4 violins or some clarinets or whatever else, just play one chorus and pass it over. Always keep in mind who you're playing with, how many people there are, and the overall mood. These are all rules of thumb, of course, to be taken with a grain of salt, but generally speaking, be mindful of these things that I'm telling you. Number 5, make sure everyone gets a chance to call tunes. And notice over the years, of course, in jam sessions, there's always going to be the more advanced players, the more accomplished players, and the ones that are a little bit less. And it happens sometimes that the advanced players just kind of instinctively take over and start calling all the tunes. And by doing so, they're kind of sometimes subconsciously weeding out the players that maybe have less experience or have less personality. There's no reason to be that one of those guys. If you're more advanced and you're playing with players that are less advanced, make them feel welcome, have them pick a few tunes, even if they're tunes that you don't love, and just keep the positivity in the core of the group. So don't be a jam session hog. Let everybody else breathe. Let everybody else have some say in what needs to happen to it. And again, if you're not loving the situation for whatever reason, the level of the players is not as great as you wish, play your few tunes and then you can also just take off or leave or thank everyone and move on. But while you're in it, it's always a good habit to let everyone that's in it feel appreciated and feel part of the group. Number 6, keep your head up. It's unbelievable how many times I'm in a jam session and I'll be looking at everyone else and there's those players that are just, I call them the helmet players. It's like they have their helmet on and they're playing all by themselves, right? So they're just like... I mean, they might as well stay at home and played by themselves. It would have been the same. Don't be that guy. It's also a very, psychologically, it's also not very inviting to everyone else. When your head is down on your own instrument and you're all by yourself and not willing to communicate. Remember that watching others is just as important as listening to others, and it goes hand in hand. Remember that jazz and gypsy jazz in general are a music of communication. So as much as you're listening, you want to also be watching and taking cues from everyone else and vice versa. The communication can be even spoken sometimes, even during a jam session, or unspoken, but definitely visual. You want to make sure that you're open to suggestions, open to cues, and again, vice versa. So if that's not natural to you, you want to incorporate that into your practice and gradually get comfortable not always watching your instrument. You can tell players that have experience are comfortable watching others while playing, and players that are only accustomed to playing in their living room or in their bedroom, they're the helmet musicians, where they're sort of so worried about what they want to do or need to do or feel like they need to do that they just tune out from everyone else. And that's not a good vibe and not a good energy to bring to a jam session. So keep that in mind and work on it, practice on it, look up, look at people, and be comfortable not always watching your instrument alone. Number 7 might seem like an obvious one, but always go to a jam session not just with one pick, have a couple of picks in your pocket, extra ones. Unless you're Matteo Mancuso, who can play with his fingers, we need our picks in Gypsy Jazz. And what a shame if you're going to miss a jam because you don't have an extra pick and you forget it or you lose it or you don't remember where you put it last and now you can't play because you don't have a pick. It just doesn't make sense. Just bring a couple extra and everything will be fine. Also, less experienced players might need you to lend them one, so just always have 2 or 3 around. Number 8. This one drives me crazy. Usually jam sessions happen in circles, and usually there's a natural order to solos where the solos will move from one person to another, sort of, side by side. There's nothing that gets to me more when this natural order is broken. Why? If you're the first one who's taking a solo, and then there's a person to your right, for example, who starts the next solo, then musicians should just naturally let that flow keep going and the next person right, etc. I can't stand it when I take a solo, the person on my right or on my left takes a solo, and then somebody else from some other place in the circle just randomly just jumps in and takes the solo. It's like me, 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 me. When you respect the order of the circle, it just makes it easier to follow a certain pattern and a certain order. Everyone knows who's going to solo next or who's supposed to solo next. The only exception I would make is when, for example, there's violinists or clarinetists and guitarists. Then I would probably give more importance to the fact that instruments should alternate. If there's a guitar solo, then maybe it should be a violin solo. Then back to a guitar, then a clarinet. That would be also the best possible thing. But even in that case, it's always easier if everyone is sort of stacked where there can be a natural order that follows a circle. It's just the simplest thing. On a side note to that, if I'm taking the melody, or whoever is taking the melody should have the freedom to take the first chorus, unless otherwise expressed by the person who's playing the melody. So in a jam session, always look to who's playing the melody to take the first solo, unless they expressly don't want to, and then they'll make it known, and then somebody else will take the first solo. But if you're playing in a jam session and somebody's taking that melody, everyone should be in the attitude of letting that person take the first solo. Generally, that's what happens. But you don't want to be that guy that if somebody else is playing the melody, then you just jump in and take the first solo. Unless you're really good friends and you just want to joke around or piss them off, or it's just between you guys, it's okay. But if you're in a jam with people you don't know so well, somebody's taking that melody, just assume they'll take the first solo. So try to keep that order of a circle so that everybody has a natural flow of the order of solos, and let whoever's taking that melody be the first soloist unless otherwise expressed. Number 9, if there's a bass player, most of your attention should be on that bass player. You can usually tell very quickly experienced jam session players and experienced musicians from non-experienced players, especially in Gypsy Jazz, when there's a disconnect between bass players and whoever is playing the rhythm in that moment. In good jam sessions, bass players and rhythm players will connect immediately and will be playing together on a frequency and on an energy level. And really the combination of proper bass and proper rhythm is what makes the beauty of this sound. Especially in Gypsy Jazz, bass and rhythm guitar is just like bass and drums in a modern jazz jam session. They have to really think together. They have to be on the same page, on the same wavelength for the music to really shine. You want that cohesion. So if you're playing in the jam and you're not soloing and there's a bass player, really concentrate on connecting with that bass player and creating a collaboration where you're playing together in terms of tempo, in terms of frequency of each other's sound, and really create the best possible carpet for soloists to play over. Sometimes the communication can be verbal, or sometimes it's just looking at each other and connecting. Also, bass players will appreciate that very much because in many situations they're kind of either snobbed or, they're just not seen as the primary actors on the scene. So giving importance to the bass player will usually make them play better or be more positively involved in the jam than if they're just ignored. And finally, number 10, sometimes just listen. Anytime you're in a jam session or you're about to get into a jam session, always really be mindful of the situation. I remember my very first years when I would go to Samoa. There are times when I'd be just walking in the campsite and all of a sudden I would see, Angelo De Bar jamming with Fapi Lafertan by themselves. It's probably not the best idea to just jump in to any jam session just because you might feel like it. Always evaluate, always consider who's playing, what their level might be compared to yours. Of course, there's nothing wrong with asking to jam. There's nothing wrong with being available to jam. But another thing is to just barge in without necessarily being invited. I know it's a subtle thing because jam sessions are supposed to be situations where everyone is playing and everyone plays together. But I suppose there are some unspoken little hierarchies, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's, of course, just a natural thing. If I was a basketball player and I go to a playground and there's Kobe Bryant playing with Scottie Pippen, I'm not just going to ask or just jump in and play with them unless I happen to know them very well, the mood is right, they're in the mindset of allowing lesser skilled players to play with them. So always think about those things. You want to make sure you don't have an overbearing presence. Also, get to know the people, get to know as many musicians as possible, so that even if they are better than you, they'll be so much more prone to letting you in when the situation is right. But learn to really read situations and know when it's the right moment for you to jump in a jam and play. And sometimes listening to great jam sessions is a great way to learn as well. Not only being in them playing, sometimes just observing what great players might be doing, how they're interacting, what happens during those jam sessions. And maybe sometimes while you're playing in them, you might miss a lot of those things. And sometimes it's good to just be outside looking in and observing and learning that way as well. Okay, I truly hope this video was valuable to you. It's extremely important that we become musicians that other musicians and other people want to be around and feel like playing with. And that is the goal of this video. So don't hesitate. If there's any questions, write in the comments. Or if you have any thoughts, comment below. I want to know your thoughts. Also, if there's anything you would add to this list, absolutely feel free to add those in the comments as well. These are my main 10 points, but you might have many more that are just as valid, if not more. Also, don't forget to check the resources in my description. Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, my new ebook, my free Zooms, the free transcriptions, a lot of little resources that I think could be of help. Stay blessed, and I will see you in the next video.